Hi everybody, welcome back. In this one, we're gonna work on the API interactions. We're gonna focus on just getting set up here in step two. Step one, stretch goals. This is just a reminder. Make sure you complete these. They're due this sprint. All right, so getting set up with this API. This is something that exists. It's a service that exists out there that we can send requests to HTTP requests and receive current weather data for a specific location. And that's exactly what we're going to do with it. Um, to to get started, what you need to do is go to the website and register for it. That's the first step. Once you've registered, then you can click your name, go to My API Keys, and generate an API key. You can give it whatever name you want. I have two, you don't need to. You'll eventually need to copy this and use it in your project. One thing that I want to emphasize here is that in general, you do not expose your API keys to version control. You don't check them into version control. You don't expose them in the browser because they are sensitive. They might have sensitive data or billing plan associated with it. But in this case, neither of those is the case, so we're not going to worry about that. You'll learn more about that later on when you study the back end, and you'll learn how to handle stuff like that. All right, once you have your API key, let's take a look at the instructions, and then I'll ask you to give it a try. Try setting it up. So here we have the URL that you'll need to send the request to. The basic structure can be very similar to what you did in Spots. You'll have a separate file, but call it Weather API because this is going to be, you're going to have another API file aside from this. You'll have to import, once you create, you'll import the API module or import the maybe just the function to app.js because I would probably recommend just creating a single function for this fetch request. You don't need to create an entire class. That would be overkill in this case. You could actually create a class and then have the parsing of the data be methods of that class, but that would be a little more complicated. Do not worry about this part. We will deal with that later. So what you want to focus on is just creating a function that sends the fetch request, exporting that function into uh, app.js, into app.jsx. Sorry, it should say JSX. But these are used interchangeably. There are other Vite uses JSX, others use JS. So create the function that makes the fetch request, import that into app.jsx, use it. You can use it. You could use it inside a fetch request. Sorry, a use effect. You could use it inside a use effect. That's what you would probably want to do. And make sure you can see the data in the network panel and logging it to the console, both of those things. That's your challenge, and it could be a little challenging, so don't worry if you don't get it all right. Unpause the video and I'll walk through it. Okay, so we go here, and we need a couple files, right? I'm going to the CD into SRC, and we will create utils slash weather a oops, utils slash weather API.js and utils slash constants.js. Constants is going to be for storing the API key and the coordinates of our preferred location. What is that preferred location? As I've mentioned, we're just going to hard code it. So I'm just going to uh, use my current location. You can find it at this website if you just allow it to tell you. Um, latitude and longitude. So there's latitude. Make sure to take the negative if you have a negative sign because it's important. Without it, I believe I would be in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Um, this is my location, and we could do something like const latitude and then longitude, but I'm gonna wrap it in an object called coordinates. And the red squiggles, this is I actually have my graphical linting set up before it was only set up at the terminal. So now you'll see linting rules, which are very important. I should have had it set up last time. So this is telling me coordinates is assigned a value but never used. Nothing to worry about. It's just that I haven't exported it yet. Exporting something makes it used. And this is one of the cases, maybe the only case, where you can silence that um, without doing something else in this the same file with this. Usually you have to write coordinates again somewhere to use it, you know. There are probably other cases, but basically this is a shorthand for doing something like this. Export curly braces coordinates. Now it's more clear that yes, we are using this somewhere else. We can do lat and lon as the don't have any spaces in there. That would probably break something. Lat and lon instead of the longer latitude and longitude. I believe it will be clear enough. This is just an object literal here. And there we are. API key. Wrong file. I'm putting this in the wrong file. This is supposed to go in constants. API key. Go back here and grab it. Make sure to export that too. Weather API.js. So now many of you probably would have imported, and this will work. Import these things from constants. What is the other coordinates? And then do something like function. We need a function that's going to get weather data. Well, I'm going to call it get weather data because that's what the function does. Some of you probably would have, and this is what I would have done for sure, is refer back to the previous project to see how you set this up. And of course, it is a little different because I'm not using a method, but inside that just matters to like kind of how you write the shell. Inside it's the same. You got to return a fetch request. You need to return it. If you're using a function keyword, the only way to return something is to use the return keyword. There are ways to return stuff from function declarations without the return statement, but I'm not going to go into that. The first URL that you send to the fetch request is always the first argument you send to you pass to the fetch function is the URL. And we give you that here. You can also derive it from the documentation. Now, let me just show you that because in general, you're not going to have somebody saying here is the thing you need to, the URL you need to send it to. You have to go through the docs. So here, this is not the docs we want. This is actually the docs we want. I believe 3.0 is more recent and they don't let you use it for free. This is 2.5. And so basically, as you can see, what we are giving you is very similar to what is here, except we made it work a little better with JavaScript by inserting those dollar signs and making all the placeholders valid JavaScript units. And also, The only other difference is that we set units equals imperial. And this is actually important. Imperial means, I guess, is the British Empire, I suppose, because it's the standard U.S. stuff. And you might think that that would be the default, or that maybe metric would be the default, but no, it's Kelvin is the default for this service, and so that can produce confusion if you definitely if you don't make sure that you are using imperial, you would have to convert everything. Okay, so um, forget if I have it on my clipboard, so I'll copy it, go back to VS Code, need to pass it in a string like so. Now this would just send, you know what, let's do it this way. I'm going to export it. Let's get it set up so that we are sending this request and see what results we get. I think it's always a good idea to, um, or often a good idea to kind of set up everything so that you're getting some sort of output early on in the process. I'm going to get rid of these. Those were from a previous project. I will assume that those have been completed. As I mentioned, we'll use a use effect. You could probably avoid using a use effect in this case, but this is how you usually see it. Use effect. You just encountered that in the sprint. What is it? It is a hook that lets you run a bit of code at certain times in the life cycle of your function component. And so the code that you will run is the code that is inside the callback function that you pass as its first argument. It accepts a second argument that is optional. If you don't pass a second argument, this function will run every time the component re-renders, the first render and all other renders. So for example, every time this active modal prop state changes, so anytime you open or close a modal, the component re-renders, this function runs. We don't want to do that. We don't want to constantly be fetching more weather data. We just want to do it once. Now, in a more robust application, you might do some polling, like every so often you would send a new request to get updated information, but we're just going to do it once when the component first renders. So we can call it in a use effect with the second argument being an empty array. It's called a dependency array. So this makes it just run that one time. If we wanted, for instance, which we don't, to run this use effect every time a modal opened or closed, we could do this. And it would also run on the initial render. It always does. Okay, so that's that. That's use effect. Now we can call our get weather data function and put the dot then and the dot catch here because we know that we're going to need them. We always need them. And if you refer back to your previous project, you'll see that there's a commonality in how these are handled. You have something like this, although yours might certainly look different. In fact, it almost certainly does because I believe you will have written some separate functions. You might have just a named function in here, but I'm just doing it kind of from scratch. So if we wanted to see the data, I'm actually going to change this to call it data. We could do it like this. We could log the data to the console. And this would be whatever is getting returned from the previous dot then or from the fetch request. But now you probably remember that we actually need a dot then in here. Dot then. And this dot then needs to do some initial triage, basically. It needs to check the response to see if it is okay or not. And there's a convenient property called okay that you can check. If it is true, then what we want to do, because this is a JSON API, which is very common, it's not the only type, but we want to parse the request for its JSON. And that's how you do it. If not, we need to reject it. Promise.reject. And what I would maybe do is error and then show the status code. I'm using the template literal syntax. So res.status will be the status code. Error from weather API, to be a little more explicit there. So if res.ok is true, we're going to return res.json. Oh, we need to return it. Now we can't do this. That's just not valid syntax. We return it here. Because the way it works is this is a ternary operator. It just checks. If this is true, it returns this value. And so that's what we return from the function. Otherwise, it returns the promise.reject, which results in an error getting thrown. The error will be handled here. So we need to log any errors to the console, preferably using console.error. You may also recall that we don't have to do all this. We don't need to, all that we need to pass to catch is a function that accepts an error as an argument. This is a function that accepts an error as an argument. But so is this. Console.error is an error that is a function that we can just pass the error to. That's all we need to do. In a more robust application, we would do more than this, though. We would not just log the error to the console. We would need to handle errors in some way. But that's beyond the scope of these videos. Okay, so this is like some basic, the basic stuff that you would kind of always need to do in a case like this. Let's see what result we get. Go to the browser. I'll close these. And you know what? I'm going to switch to Chrome to keep it in a separate browser window. Where did my Chrome window go? There it is. And localhost 3000, right? Yeah, 3000. Okay. So check the network panel. Getting an error. So what do you think the error is from? This, I kind of did this intentionally. What we're getting is unauthorized, right? One of the first things you always want to do is look at the request headers to see well, the request URL actually. You don't even need to look at request headers to see what the problem is. We need to send an actual latitude and longitude, but the real problem here is that we need to send a real API key, not $, curly braces, and then the words API key. So we'll fix that in a minute, but I also want to show you something else, just out of interest, maybe. If you switch to logging with console.log, refresh the page, the output is a little different. This is from the browser, but this is the output that we're logging, and it's not really it's less informative. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why you use console.error instead. Okay, to fix the API key issue, try and do this on your own. And then you can unpause the video and I'll show you how. It's pretty simple. All right, so if we do, so this is the first thing that you would try is to um, turn it into a template literal, as I've hinted at. But uh-oh, now nothing appears and it's telling us latitude is not defined. It's also we're also being told by our linter that longitude and API key is not defined, right? Well, what if we uncomment the import statement? Still telling us that these things are not defined. We'll get the same exact error, but we just need to update it so that we're using the things that we have defined. We have an API key. We just need to pass it by the same name to that, uh, uh, embed it inside the template string. And we can use coordinates.lat and coordinates.long. Remember, that's what I stored in the coordinates object. Constants lat long. Okay. Now let's see what we get. Refresh. Hey, we are getting logs to the console in app.jsx. This is not where I live, so we'll look into that in a moment. I really thought that I had the latitude and longitude right. Lat, coordinates.lat, long, lat, long. Huh. Well, we'll look into that in a moment. Go to the network panel, look inside, we can see the information. Oh, I'm doing latitude and longitude both the same. So it was an error in how I am passing things. Go back to that. Now it should work. Should say my location, refresh the page, and yes, this is where I live in Pennsylvania. And we'll look into more detail into the API, into the response in the next video. But I'll just point out a couple things. We have this weather property that tells us the weather condition. We'll be using that later on. Inside the main object, it gives us the temperature in imperial units, which we will be using in the next video. And it also tells us the sunrise and the sunset of the current day. And we'll use these to determine what time of day it is, whether it's day or night, by determining if it is currently between the sunrise and the sunset. And we'll just make that stand in for saying what that'll be daytime. If it's after sunrise and before sunset, it's daytime. All right, that's it for now. Next time we will start doing more with the API.